The morning sun cuts through the mist above Caracas, a small Venezuelan town nestled between green hills and the Caribbean Sea. Soldiers march in formation alongside local farmers, their boots kicking up dust as they move down a narrow road. The sound of drums and the rhythmic cadence of commands echo across the valley. At the front of the column, Venezuela's powerful interior minister, Diosdado Cabello, raises his fist. This is not a parade, it's a military drill, part of what Caracas calls sovereignty exercises, maneuvers designed to send a clear message to Washington. Venezuela is ready. President Nicolás Maduro has ordered the largest military deployment along Venezuela's borders in years. The move comes after the United States expanded its naval presence in the Caribbean, a mobilization that Washington says is aimed at fighting drug trafficking, but which Caracas views as the prelude to aggression. Since August, 7 U.S. warships, including the USS Lake Erie, have been patrolling waters near Venezuelan shores. The operation, led by the Pentagon and supported by the CIA, has already resulted in the sinking of 5 vessels allegedly linked to narcotics trafficking. According to US reports, at least 27 people have been killed in these incidents, but in Caracas, officials call it something else, an imperialist provocation. As Venezuelan state television broadcasts images of soldiers crossing muddy rivers and setting up encampments near the border with Colombia, the tone from the government is defiant. These exercises are not for show, says a local commander. They are for defense, to protect the revolution. In Táchira, the heart of the western frontier, the Venezuelan army has deployed some 17,000 troops. Armored vehicles move slowly through the narrow streets of San Antonio, one of the main border crossings into Colombia. Soldiers patrol the bridges that connect the two nations, checking vehicles and inspecting cargo. Nearby, militiamen, many of them civilians in olive green uniforms, train with wooden rifles under the watchful eye of the interior minister. Further south, in the Amazonian state of Amazonas, soldiers guard energy installations and communications towers, sites that Caracas considers strategically vital. In the coastal states of Sucre and Nueva Esparta, naval patrols sweep the Caribbean waters, their radars scanning the horizon toward Trinidad and Tobago, just 11 kilometers away. That is where another story unfolds, a story that has deepened the pain and suspicion surrounding this escalating standoff. Earlier this week, residents of Las Cuevas, a fishing village in northern Trinidad, reported that 2 of their countrymen were aboard a small vessel that was bombed by US forces off the Venezuelan coast. The boat was allegedly suspected of carrying narcotics, but to their families, those men were fishermen, ordinary people caught in the crossfire of great power politics. Lynette Burnley, the aunt of one of the victims, speaks to AFP. People say all kinds of things, but we can't say for sure, she says, her voice trembling. When they go out to sea, we don't know who goes fishing or who does what. I know my nephew is a fisherman. Her words capture a truth often lost in geopolitics, the human cost of confrontation. For years, Venezuela's coasts and borders have been at the center of the US war on drugs. Washington accuses President Nicolás Maduro and his top generals of running a narco state. In recent months, former US President Donald Trump, now back in office, has stepped up the rhetoric, accusing Maduro of poisoning American streets with Venezuelan cocaine. On his Truth Social account, Trump posted, "The CIA has full authorization to neutralize the Maduro regime's criminal operations. America will not tolerate narco-tyrants in our hemisphere." The post was later amplified by US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who confirmed that covert operations were well underway. In Caracas, the response was immediate and furious. Speaking on national television, Nicolás Maduro announced that his government was consulting the Supreme Court to declare a national state of external commotion, a legal mechanism that would allow the government to mobilize all institutions, resources, and militias in the face of what he calls imperial aggression. Today, Maduro declared, we began consultations for a constitutional decree to declare a state of emergency due to an external threat to protect our people, our peace, and our stability. If Venezuela were to be attacked militarily by the United States, the response will be total and decisive. The president's words, broadcast across all state channels, were met with cheers from his supporters and alarm from the international community. The United Nations called for maximum restraint, while the Organization of American States warned that any escalation could destabilize the entire Caribbean basin. Meanwhile, satellite images show Venezuelan missile batteries being positioned near the western borders, and military analysts confirm that Sukhoi fighter jets have been moved to air bases in Zulia and Apure. Back in Caracas, footage from Venezuelan state television shows Diosdado Cabello leading columns of armed farmers through the countryside. Behind him, banners read, "Homeland or nothing." The exercises, he says, are meant to train the people for resistance. The symbolism is unmistakable. A nation bracing for confrontation, invoking the spirit of past revolutions to face a modern-day superpower. At the same time, in Washington, the tone is equally uncompromising. In a press briefing, Secretary Hegseth claimed that Venezuela has become a hub for cocaine shipments, illegal arms, and terrorist networks. He insisted that the US naval buildup is purely defensive, focused on intercepting drug shipments and protecting allied shipping lanes. But analysts note that the operation's scope, involving surveillance drones, intelligence aircraft, and special forces teams, suggests broader ambitions. Some regional diplomats privately acknowledge fears that the US could be laying the groundwork for limited military strikes or even regime destabilization efforts. For now, both sides appear locked in a cycle of escalation and denial. The Venezuelan government accuses Washington of violating its sovereignty. The US insists it is targeting transnational crime. And in between, ordinary people, fishermen, soldiers, and border villagers are caught in the tension. The story also has an economic layer. With Venezuela still struggling under severe sanctions, its government views these exercises as a form of internal mobilization, a way to rally the population and project strength amid shortages and inflation. State television frames the drills as a patriotic duty, showing close-ups of farmers turned militiamen vowing to defend the homeland. At one point, the camera zooms in on an elderly woman holding a rifle. "This is for our children," she says softly. In the fishing villages of the Paria Peninsula, however, people see the danger differently. "When the Americans come with their ships," says one local fisherman, "our boats stop going out. We lose our income. We lose everything." The US operation, though officially limited to maritime interdiction, has created a ripple effect across the region. In Trinidad and Tobago, authorities now patrol beaches where debris from destroyed vessels has washed ashore. In Colombia, border towns like Cúcuta and Arauca report increased Venezuelan troop activity. And in Brazil, the military has reinforced observation posts along the Rio Negro, worried that the Venezuelan buildup could spill across its frontier. The geopolitical chessboard is shifting fast. At the same time, international observers point to a broader trend, the remilitarization of the Caribbean. Cuba has increased its coastal surveillance. Nicaragua has opened new air bases. Even Guyana, embroiled in its own territorial dispute with Venezuela, has strengthened ties with US Southern Command. For Caracas, these moves are part of a US-led encirclement. For Washington, they are strategic necessity. The reality is that both sides are preparing, not necessarily for war, but for confrontation. And as each statement hardens, the room for diplomacy narrows. In the final scenes from Caracas, Venezuelan Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello salutes the troops, then turns to the cameras. "The empire wants to scare us," he says, "but we are not afraid." His words are broadcast live across Venezuela, on television, radio, and social media, while in Washington, Trump's latest post simply reads, "We're watching." The contrast could not be starker. Two leaders separated by ideology, geography, and history, yet bound together by a confrontation that feels increasingly inevitable. From the jungles of Amazonas to the waves off Trinidad, from the Panama Canal to the narrow streets of Táchira, the Caribbean has once again become a theatre of power, a region where global politics meets local lives, and where every maneuver, every strike, and every speech carries consequences that ripple far beyond the horizon. And tonight, as the sun sets over Venezuela's western border, the soldiers remain at their posts.